welcome to Media Spectrum, where stories still matter. Now, this last St. Patrick's Day, I decided to celebrate by having a little mini marathon, a double feature of Martin Scorsese's Irish crime dramas, those being Gangs of New York and The Departed. So those are what I'll be reviewing these next couple weeks, starting today with Gangs of New York. By the way, there will be full spoilers in this video. There's no way I can analyze this without it, so full spoilers going forward, you've been warned. Okay. Now, this is one of the movies that I actually think almost proves how great Scorsese is. Not because it's one of his best movies, it's not. If I were to rank all of his movies that I've seen, and in all fairness, I have not seen all of them. The man has made a lot of movies, but I've seen quite a few of them. I've seen the majority, I'm pretty sure. And out of all the movies of his I've seen, I would probably rank this in the bottom 3. This is a deeply, deeply flawed film that has a lot for me to pick apart, but it's still very compelling. Now, unfortunately, this is a movie that didn't really turn out the way Scorsese wanted, I believe. This is a movie he was trying to make since the 1970s. It was a very long-standing passion project for him. He eventually got it made in the mid-2000s, but unfortunately, his producer was Harvey Weinstein, who, in addition to being an infamous sex pest, also had a real habit of interfering with the movies heavily. I'm going to leave a link in the description of this to the review Ranter did, because he really digs into all the backstage shenanigans of what happened here. The real quick and simple version of it is Scorsese wanted to do a 3.5-hour movie. Weinstein turned it into a 2.5-hour movie. He insisted on casting Cameron Diaz. He changed the score, all kinds of things. So this might be the most compromised movie in Scorsese's entire catalog. And it's still damn entertaining, even though I definitely have some negative things to pick out about it. It's a movie very, very worth watching. And when one of your worst movies is still better than a lot of filmmakers' best, that's pretty strong evidence you're one of the greatest of all time. So to start out with, I'll talk about the flaws I see in this movie, the problems I have with it. And we have to start with 2 of the 3 lead performances, that being Leo DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz. First off, their accents. Both of them have kind of infamously awful accents in this. There's Diaz first, who her accent is just either cartoonish.
Gentlemen, I leave you in the grace and favor of the Lord.
Yeah, they're always after me, Lucky Charms.
Or it's gone completely. There's almost no in between. And it just never sounds even remotely real. Now, I will give Leo some credit that he was trying to do something really nuanced, which was to have the accent of someone who was Irish and who grew up with a bit of that accent very early on, but then spent most of their life in an orphanage and largely lost that accent. So they would have a kind of accent, but not really, kind of wishy-washy accent, which is what he was aiming for. Unfortunately, he doesn't really pull it off. It also fades in and out, kind of like Diaz's does, although maybe not to the same extent, but it never sounds real. And especially in his voiceover monologues, it just really sounds very, very off.
We always liked a good fire in the points. You could generally pick up a little swag, and if the cops came along, then you really got a show.
And not only are their accents not good, but then they're going up against actual Irish actors.
Citizens of the 5 Points, Mr. Bill Cutting is attempting to draw me into an argument that would no doubt end in bloodshed and the compromising of my office.
Or actors like John C. Reilly, who has a very good Irish accent.
Come on now, lad. Remember your father and me. Are you too young to remember your old Uncle Jack?
Ah, the times we had.
And they just look amateurish, frankly, next to them. Outside of just the accent work, Cameron Diaz is just really miscast in this in general. I get she was kind of an it girl at this time. I think it was 2002 this movie came out. It was made over the course of 3 years, so it was a very, very long production. And, you know, she's a pretty enough girl. She's good in other movies. I love her in Shrek, for example. But is this character in this setting, she feels out of place. It's not surprising to me that she was not Scorsese's pick. And then as for Leo goes, I might get some flack for this because I know people love Leo. I don't hate him as an actor. He has performances like in Wolf of Wall Street and Django Unchained that I really, really, really like. However, I just cannot buy Leo as a hard man. I cannot buy him as a tough guy. And any movie that leans into that whether it's this, The Departed, The Revenant, always kind of rubs me wrong. I just don't believe him in these roles. And this might be the most egregious of them. You know, this guy really is supposed to be a street brawler. He's someone who's supposed to rally a whole gang around him. And Leo just doesn't have that type of charisma to me. You know, Leo does not strike me as a leader of men. I'm not saying he's not charismatic. He absolutely is, but there's different types of charisma, you know? He is the type of charisma that allows him to bag 20-something-year-old models, not the kind of charisma that's gonna inspire a group of men to fight for him. So I do think he's just very miscast as this character. I would have loved to have seen an actual Irish actor, or even just an actor who could do an Irish accent more believably, and an actor who was a little bit more of like a tough guy. The second issue outside of two of our leads is the pacing for this movie. The pacing gets really, really weird. We have an incredibly strong prologue, which I'll talk about later in the positives. And then most of the movie is the second act, in which we are watching Leo develop this very weird relationship with Bill the Butcher, Daniel Day-Lewis's character, in which he's planning to kill him eventually. This is the guy who killed his dad. This is a very simple revenge story, but he's infiltrating his gang and getting close to him to know his habits better, to plan the assassination better. And during that time, they do develop a very real bond, and there's kind of a bit of a love triangle going on between them and Cameron Diaz. In the second act, it's where most of this movie takes place, and it's good, but after the assassination attempt that goes wrong, the last third of this movie just moves at an insane pace, where all at the same time, we have Bill the Butcher just gradually unraveling as society's changing around him and he can't handle it. We have Leo bringing the dead rabbits back together, which we see almost none of. We see so little of that whole process. And we have this civil war building up in the background, building up to this big draft that we know is going to cause issues and ends up causing a riot. And this third act, it's not that long. It's like 30, maybe 40 minutes. And there's about an hour and a half worth of story crammed into this act. Just as an example of what I'm talking about, we have Matty Moody himself, Brendan Gleeson, playing one of the Irish guys who was part of the original Dead Rabbits gang, who they decide to run for sheriff. He wins handedly, seems like people are behind him and he's popular. Then Bill the Butcher shows up and just kills him. And all of that, choosing to run him as sheriff, him winning, him campaigning, him getting people behind him winning the election, and then Bill assassinating him, happens within maybe a 10-minute window. Maybe 10-minute window. And when stuff is moving just this fast, it's so hard to process and even just keep up with what's happening, let alone care about what's happening. And the thing is, Scorsese is a master at doing fast pacing. Goodfellas alone is proof of that. He is able to tell a story at a relentless pace when he wants to. The problem is, in movies like Goodfellas, Casino, even Wolf of Wall Street, that's a longer movie, but it feels way, way faster than this does, because he's effectively telling a story very quickly. Whereas in this, he's just cramming a bunch of stuff in there. And it does not at all surprise me to find out there was a lot of footage left on the cutting room floor. I imagine the bulk of it probably does come from this third act. And so the result is we have a masterful prologue, a strong but not quite as compelling second act, and then the third act, it barely keeps from flying off the rails completely. So it really kind of unravels as the movie goes on, which is unfortunate. I also have to say that the assassination attempt Leo plans on Bill the Butcher is so dumb. The plan is like to throw a knife at him and hit him in the heart in this crazy crowded environment where they're inside this big theater and locked in. And it's just like, was it supposed to be a suicide mission? Was that something I missed completely, that this whole revenge thing was meant to be a suicide mission? Because I don't think it was. And if it was not intended to be a suicide mission, there is not a chance in hell Leo would have gotten out of there, even if it did go correctly. So it just feels like a very dumb, convoluted plan. I get that you want to take the guy out in a public place. I get there's a certain machismo pride about that. I'm pretty sure there's even a line about if you kill the king, you gotta do it in front of a full court, something like that. But there had to be a smarter way to go about it if he had any intention of surviving the attempt. And then afterwards, they make a huge deal out of Bill maiming him, and it looks really nasty at first. He gets a hot knife and goes at him and does something to his face. We're thinking, oh my god. But then once he recovers, he just has like a brand on the far side of one cheek, and that's all. And don't get me wrong, that would suck. fuck, I would not want someone to brand me across the cheek with a hot knife, but this is a brutal fucking movie where we see all kinds of violence. We see people collecting ears and noses off of corpses as trophies, and that just felt so weirdly tame. Like, if you're going to scar the man and send a message, there's a lot more nasty things you could do with a hot knife and still keep him alive. You could easily take an eye, you could take his nose, you could take his tongue, you could take his ears, you give him the pain, as it were.
To the death.
No! To the pain.
It feels like a very weird, mild choice where they should have gone farther with it, and especially in a movie that otherwise had no problems going pretty far with the violence. But that's it. Those are my main issues with this movie. 2 of the 3 performances are really weak. The pacing is seriously problematic, especially in the last third of the film, and the whole assassination attempt and the result of it are just incredibly stupid and convoluted. But outside of that, this movie does do a lot of things right. So first off, I talked about the weaknesses of a couple of these performances. Daniel Day-Lewis is Bill the Butcher. My god, what a fucking legend he was in this.
Whoopsie daisy! Now it's good and broke. I can't seem to get anything right tonight.
It's almost impossible, I think, to pick the best Daniel Day-Lewis performance. I get why a lot of people are going to cite There Will Be Blood as his greatest performance. I'm not saying this is better than that, but this is so wildly entertaining. It's electric. Daniel Day-Lewis is known as a kind of insane method actor, and this movie is no different. This movie is actually one of the best examples of how crazy he was. But some of his method actics included spending several weeks training as a butcher so they could accurately play a butcher and do the knife cuts correctly, which is only in a couple scenes of the movie even. He infamously got pneumonia during the shoot and refused to take medicine or wear a modern jacket because these things did not exist back then. And maybe craziest of all, he has a glass eye, his character does, and so what he did was he got this prosthetic glass piece that he put over his eye and trained himself to tap a knife against that covered eye without blinking.
I know your works.
Which, Jesus Christ, that you tap just a little too hard once, that could go so horribly wrong in so many ways. He's a madman, and God bless him for it, because every second of screen time he has is electric. He is a wonderful villain. He's violent, he's ruthless, he's merciless, he's an abhorrently racist bigot.
Enough of this heathen music! Get rid of these goddamn monkeys! Strike up, boys! This is a night for Americans!
In fairness, everyone at this time is racist, but still, he's like extra racist. And yet, he also has a lot of respect for people who prove their strength. He has a very real respect for the priest and almost seems sad that he had to kill him. He saw him as a very worthy rival and someone he could learn from.
The priest and me, we lived by the same principles. It was only faith divided us. He spared me because he wanted me to live in shame. This was a great man.
Part of his backstory is that he rescued Cameron Diaz as a very young woman and never had sex with her until she asked for it. And in this day and age, in the 1800s, being a man who cared about consent, that puts him above a lot of guys, unfortunately. I mean, that puts him ahead of a lot of guys today, let's be very real. He is highly skilled at what he does, and he is very intelligent. He's maybe not highly educated, but he's very, very street smart. He understands people. He understands how to play people, and he understands how people interact, and is able to just socially navigate all these crazy situations. He's really charitable at times. He just gives meat to an old lady at one point, just because. And you know what? He lives honestly without compromise. Like, there is in some ways something weirdly respectable about this man. He has a very real sense of honor. It's twisted, it's violent, it's a code that allows him to murder a whole lot of people, but he does have some sort of moral code, and that is always such a more interesting villain than just a mindless sociopath. And the result is a man who is terrifying and yet funny and likable in equal measure. He is someone who you absolutely would not want to be your enemy, but you kind of do want him to be your friend. And it's such a compelling performance that it's arguably kind of a problem for the film. He just bodies every single actor who he works against. Nobody can hold their own against him. Not because none of the actors in this movie are good. There are multiple Academy Award winners in this film. But Daniel Day-Lewis, at his worst, is one of the best actors in this world. And this is him at full god tier acting strength. I have no idea what sort of deal he made with Satan to get these powers, but it was worth it. And weirdly enough, you can make a case that he's almost more of a true lead of this movie than Leo DiCaprio is. Even though we are seeing things from Leo's perspective and he's the one narrating this movie, the entire story revolves around Bill the Butcher. We see Bill the Butcher interact with virtually every character in the movie at some point. And without Day-Lewis's performance, this movie would be so much weaker. The next thing I really need to praise outside of film is the production and just kind of the choice of setting combined. But I mean, the sets, the costumes, the makeup, the hand-drawn posters of Abraham Lincoln around town. There are so many little details that make this such an incredibly lived in and believable and consistent world. And the scale of this production, this is such an overused word these days, but it is epic. It is epic in a way that we rarely see from Hollywood films anymore. There's hardly any CGI in this movie. There may be none at all. I imagine there's probably some of the big elaborate backdrops, but that's about it. The buildings, the clothing, the costumes, the blood, the violence, it's all practical. It looks incredible. Like, the detail is so fine in this movie that even the actors' teeth are kind of messed up. If you're really paying attention, you can see like Leo DiCaprio's teeth are kind of dirty, and his Irish friend has a bit of a chipped tooth and things like that. And again, this is the late 1800s, and it always bothers me when I see a period piece and all the actors have, these modern day pearly whites. Nuh-uh. That's not even remotely believable. And this is one of the only movies I've seen actually pay attention to that level of detail. And this is all in service of creating a New York that's unlike any New York we've ever seen. There are no big skyscrapers yet. This whole city is just coming together. Early on, Leo describes it as more of a furnace where a city may someday grow. And that is such a great way of describing this world. You can see the traces of it. It's already an incredibly diverse place. We see the Irish, we see the white Protestants, we see black people, we see quite a strong Chinese presence, interestingly enough. We even see, to use the terminology from the movies, he, she's. I don't know if they're transgender, I don't know if they're just transvestite, it may well be a mixture of them. These men who are basically dressed like Western saloon gals who seem to be working as sex workers. But still, it's just incredible detail that creates such a specific version of a city that we're all very familiar with, and yet makes it completely new because it's so early on. And honestly, with these really elaborate old-timey costumes, with all these wooden buildings, with this chaotic lawlessness that's going on around them, this doesn't feel like a crime drama. It's called Gangs in New York, so that's probably what you expect going into it, but it feels more like a mixture of like an old-timey period piece that you would usually see in Victorian England and a Western, as you're seeing civilization just kind of grow and come to fruition. And it creates a world that is so fascinating and kind of beautiful and nostalgic in a way, but is also brutal and terrifying. This is a place where life is very, very, very cheap. And then that kind of leads us into the themes. It's not just the set design. The ideas this movie's deal with feel more like a Western to me than your typical crime drama. And specifically, it struck me watching this how much this kind of reminded me of Red Dead Redemption. And specifically, Bill the Butcher kind of reminded me of Arthur Vanderlyn, the infamous villain from that game. And these are both very violent yet charismatic men who are desperate to live free and really cannot handle the trappings of civilization that are coming towards them. Now, they respond to it in very different ways. Arthur creates a game and tries to ride out west and escape civilization, which obviously you could only do for so long. Whereas Bill the Butcher, he tries to create his own version of civilization. He tries to hold on to an old, more brutal way of doing things and just refuses to adapt as the world is changing around him. And at the end of the day, these are both men who ultimately choose to self-destruct rather than compromise who they are. These are guys who, in a weird way have some very admirable qualities, but also just cannot function in the new world being built around them. At the same time, it shows how deeply flawed that civilization is. The politicians are the most blatantly corrupt politicians I've ever seen in a movie in this.
Oh, Jesus, no. The appearance of the law must be upheld, especially while it's being broken.
Even the cops and firefighters are effectively gains. The scene where a house is burning down and two competing groups of firefighters show up, fighting over whose district this is, and end up brawling with each other rather than putting out the fire. It's madness. It's absolute madness. And not to get super political, but I gotta say, back when this movie came out in 2003, that probably just felt like some real fun historical facts and being like, wow, aren't we glad that we've progressed so much since then? In this day and age where so many people are big Ayn Rand fans who think the answer to all the world's problems are to kill the government and privatize everything, you really want multiple privatized firefighters who are just going to let a house burn down if it's not in their official district? You really want multiple police groups who are going to fight each other over whose district this crime is taking place in? Like, this movie feels almost like a warning in some ways. You really want pure freedom? This is what it looks like. It's chaos. Pure freedom is having to watch your house burn down while a bunch of people just openly jump in and out of it, looting what they can, while the firefighters fight each other instead of putting the fire out and letting it spread to the neighbors. It is absolute fucking madness. I also have to say a real interesting theme of this movie is the Civil War, which is in its second year during the events of this film. And there's this growing tension of an incoming draft that people can buy their way out of for $300, which is the equivalent of about $9,700 today, so almost 10 grand. And man, there is some painfully relevant ideas about classism in there. And also, this is a very uncomfortable thought, but just consider that. $10,000, at least converted to today's money, to buy your way out of a war and effectively save your life. That's how much the government values me. That's how much the government values probably you. You're probably just a normal working class citizen watching this video. $10,000. The price of a decent used car. Fun thoughts to think about. Also, again, the movie's called Gangs of New York, but these versions of Gangs are not the Italian mafia, not even close. These are far more tribal, far more wild. And honestly, even though this movie never once references the Roman Empire, it does make me think about movies like The Godfather or shows like The Soprano focusing on the mafia that do occasionally reference and make allusions to the Roman Empire. And it actually feels pretty apt with this context. It's easy to see how from all this craziness, it was just begging to get organized. And within, 30 to 40 years after this, the Italians came in. At the same time, the government was cracking down. And they organized this chaos into something called the Mafia, which was way more effective and also way more terrifying in many ways. It is fascinating if you study history at all to see the way that certain trends repeat themselves. Now, I gotta say, talking about the themes also of this, at the core of this movie is a very simple revenge story. A guy watches his dad get killed by a man. He grows up, gets close to that man, kills him. That's basically the whole plot of this movie. There's nothing new. It's very simple. But this is a really good example of using a very basic, almost mundane plot for very good character work and exploring interesting historical themes. Sometimes a movie doesn't have to have a great plot. It can have a very simple plot if it uses that plot to do other good things. And finally, I mentioned the prologue earlier. The prologue, you could watch alone as like a standalone short. It is fantastic. Liam Neeson is perfectly cast as the priest. He has only a little screen time, but he leaves a huge impression. He's very believable as this other kind of more stoic alpha male that Bill the Butcher would actually respect and look up to and admire. As we pull out and see what's effectively an underground city going on here of all these Irish Catholics and their friends, kind of the outcasts of society, living literally underground in these huge, giant, multi-level wooden structures. It just shows you right away what the scale of this movie is going to be, and is so goddamn impressive. There is so much tension as we see people clearly preparing for some kind of battle, but not really understanding what's going to happen, as this tribal music plays and things are just building up. And then we get to the fight, and the fight is incredible. I understand that not everyone loves it. I get there are complaints about it. On a technical level, it is really sloppy. There are very strange things it does with speeding up and slowing down the frame rate. There are cuts that just don't even make sense. Like, we see the priest get hit in the arm with a battle axe, and then he keeps fighting and his arm is fine. Even, like, Bill the Butcher early in the fight is going on this rampage where he's slicing up dudes left and right around him and there's no blood. But I actually will defend the way this was filmed because it just adds to the chaos of it. It's something Scorsese also did in The Departed, not to jump ahead too much, but in that movie he also intentionally uses cuts that don't add up, that don't match up with each other, that look weird and strange to catch you off guard and make things feel unsettling. And that's what's going on in this fight. Yeah, it's a mess, but it's supposed to be a mess. It's supposed to make you feel the unreal chaos of a massive battle like this. And even Bill the Butcher going on that rampage with no blood, I kind of like, because it happens early on, and it lures you into almost a false sense of security. It makes you feel like, okay, I can see the violence, but it's not that nasty. This is going to be kind of tame almost. And then you start seeing how red the snow is getting. And then they start actually showing shit. And it just builds and escalates and gets nastier and nastier. And I feel like one of the real issues of society is how we tend to romanticize violence. There's nothing romantic about this. It's epic, but man, I would not want to be in that brawl, and it is so effectively well done. So, in conclusion, while I wish this movie was stronger, I really wish we could get that 3.5 hour cut of it. I wish we could see this movie with the full casting that Scorsese wanted, with the original score he wanted. As compromised as this movie is, I'm still so glad it exists. It takes place in such a unique setting that is really unlike any other film I can think of. It's a world that I could just get lost in. I would love to see this like adapted into a mini series. And of course, it's worth watching for Daniel Day-Lewis's performance alone. I cannot stress enough just how fucking good he is in this movie. And if this is one of Scorsese's most flawed films, then that's really proof he is a master. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on Gangs of New York. Next week, I'll be talking about another divisive Scorsese crime drama, The Departed. See you guys then. Until then, stay sane, stay human.